Anybody else that comes in, just whisper to them to go, like I said, center or close up here. Hey, welcome to, well, what this morning was anyway, what I felt was the perfect reading day. Nice and dreary, a little bit chilly, the type of day where you're not tempted to do much, but just kind of curl up with a blanket and a book. And that's the way that my day started, and then I came here. So it was a little bit different, but I came here excited because it was the Enthusiastic Readers Day. Those of you that are in here that are enthusiastic readers, congratulations. That's pretty exciting. It's pretty amazing. Because I don't know if you know this, but the selection process is kind of different. I ask the teachers to find the kids that will go for a book before they'll go for a phone when they have like an extra, 10 minutes or something in the period. And those teachers will then send those names to me. And you might think that it's all English teachers, but it's really not. I get a lot from the science department, a lot from the math department. And when you get your goodie bags that Mrs. Zuccarello has put together for you with your autographed book and all of that, you will also get a pamphlet in there and it will tell you who the teacher was that nominated you. So, if you don't know yet, you'll find out. Some of you might be a little bit surprised. Okay. So reading is hard. At least I get told that like at least a dozen times a day from kids that are turning in books. When I ask students who return books whether they've read it or not, because for some of them I'm like, did you really read that? Everybody's relatively pretty truthful to me. And then when I ask them why they didn't read it, I get all of the same excuses. It was too long. I didn't have enough time, even though you probably had the books in September. I don't like to read. And then when I hear that one, I press a little bit further and I'm like, well, why don't you like to read? Why not? And then I hear, because reading is hard. Well, of course it is. Do you know what's not hard? Checking your phone. That's not hard. The average American does it 144 times a day. I would guess that the average teenager does it less because you have less breaks in between where you're not looking at your phone. You just are pretty steady in and looking at stuff that's on your phone. You know what else is not hard? Watching TV. That's pretty easy too. 80% of Americans watch approximately 3 hours a day. You're probably actually in the generation that's getting most of your TV through your phones though. You're probably looking at YouTube, TikTok, and all of that, and that's serving as your time suck. Or at least maybe those people out there and not so much the people that are in here per se. But those are all passive activities. Reading's not passive. Reading is hard. It requires imagination, determination, concentration, at times validation. The casting director doesn't determine who plays the parts. We do. The author gives us suggestions on what the characters are like, but we get to fill in all the little details and we get to fill in the rest of the picture. Just for the record, every leading man in any book I've ever read is Bradley Cooper, and I'm not ashamed about that. Settings are crafted instead of scouted by some sort of scouting agent. Cliffhangers occur frequently, rather than on like a 44-minute cycle, which will happen in a TV show. And oh yeah, and there's no commercial breaks like you might get outside of the streaming world, I suppose, unless you pay for your premium streaming. But we get life breaks in the middle of the stories. And sometimes we have to just stop where we want to be and go back into the real world. The 84 enthusiastic readers honored today represent 8% of our school. And so you don't have to do the math for those of you that hate the idea of a word problem. That's 1,034 students in this school. So that's pretty impressive. You elite students don't select a screen as the portal into a fantasy world of your mind. You choose the words that are on the paper, and that is impressive. It's a special thing because reading is hard, and you stand up to the challenge. Now, I've been fortunate for these 2 years with guest speakers for the Enthusiastic Reader Celebration. Last year, students advocated for Claire LeGrand, who's a fantasy writer who lives, luckily, in Hamilton, New Jersey. That was good. And today's guest speaker is Wendy Zuccarello, another Hamilton resident. But she is even more special because she is a mom to one of our seniors. That's super cool. She has published well over a dozen books under her own name and a pen name. She first came to my attention when she donated some of her YA dystopian books to the library, and students started checking them out. And then word of mouth got out there. And I had at one point a student coming up to me saying, "Did you get the new Zuccarello book in yet?" And I got it in the next day, and he was very happy about that one. I had waiting lists for some of her books. So she caught on. And it became very clear that Mrs. Zuccarello will be perfect for this program and to talk to you. And she has a very unique story to tell you about how she became a writer. And what a great memory it's going to be for both her and her daughter, who is going to be graduating in the top 10% of her class, by the way, since I'm throwing out statistics like crazy, like I'm a math teacher or something. So please welcome the 2023 Page Turner Award winner, Wendy Zuccarello.
Everybody hear me okay? I just wanted to say I'm so excited to be here with you guys today, especially at this amazing event to celebrate readers, which is what it's all about. I first want to thank Ms. Kaharczyk for inviting me and congratulate our readers who were nominated as enthusiastic readers. Being an author essentially means nothing if there's no one who will read what you write, so you guys are what make my job important. Before I get into how I became a writer, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Wendy Zuccarello. I write contemporary romance and romantic suspense books. I published my first book, Finding an Anchor, back in 2019. I have since written and published 21 books under 2 different pen names, all within the romance genre. I have my bachelor's degree in animal science from Rutgers University and an MFA in creative writing from Southern New Hampshire University. Aside from writing, I spend most of my time reading. I love all things romance, but will read just about anything I can get my hands on. I am a wife, as Ms. Kaharczyk said, a mom of 2 amazing teenagers, Caitlin, who is, I lost her somewhere back there, there she is, and AJ, who is a sophomore at Hamilton West. I am obsessed with animals, which you'll learn more about shortly, and we have 3 dogs, 2 guinea pigs, 1 extremely grumpy ornate box turtle, and a pond full of fish in our backyard. I also have a wild chipmunk that loves to eat from my hand. Little munchkin down there. She's actually a character in one of my books. I am a huge nerd. I love all things Disney, Star Wars, Marvel, but my biggest obsession is anything dinosaurs. Sounds silly, but it is. I could watch the Jurassic Park or World movies at any time. I actually wrote a romance novel involving dinosaurs. Time travel also, obviously. And I love the meme that says my toxic trait is that if they opened Jurassic Park today, I would still totally go, and Caitlin would tell you that I would probably even apply for a job there. As Ms. Kaharczyk said, my path to writing is about as far from normal as possible. I mentioned that I published my first book in 2019, so that means I was a tad older than most writers when they get their start. I took a very roundabout route, but that's part of what makes my journey to writing unique. I have done a lot over the years that led me to writing, but I can honestly tell you that my love for writing was not always there. I ask that you bear with me a little bit until I get to how I got here. And I will apologize in advance because some of the pictures I'm going to show you are from back in the Stone Age before digital photography, so they are blurry, they were taken with film, and they are terrible, so sorry. When I was little, I was that little girl who wanted to work with dolphins, like about every other girl on the planet. I saw those people swimming with them at the SeaWorld, and I knew that someday I was going to do that. Everyone thought it was a silly dream and that it would never happen, but not me. I was determined to not only do it, but prove everyone wrong who told me I couldn't. I learned at a young age that you have to work hard for what you want, and that often includes facing your fears and taking chances. Facing your fears. That's a big one. You never know what life is going to throw your way, but in my mind, I never wanted to look back and say, I wish I would have, for anything. I have a list of fears that tried to stop me over the years, and you're probably going to laugh at most of them. In high school, I worked with an animal hospital through an internship program. From there, I went to Rutgers University for animal science. My first fear, chickens. Just wait. So, you'll get it soon. Part of the animal science program at Rutgers is getting hands-on experience with the animals on the farm. In my animal nutrition class, my professor was working with chickens on the quality of chicken feed. There were 3 different groups of chickens. First received the highest quality, second middle tier, and the third the lowest quality feed. While all the feeds were enough to sustain their growth, it was essentially the difference between eating lobster and eating roll every day. We were assigned to groups and come in and feed and clean each day, with each group working daily with the same group of chickens. So you can probably guess which group I had to work with. Group C, the ones eating the low quality feed. And let me tell you, those chickens knew exactly what they were missing out on, and they took it very, very personally. I got to the point where no one from my group would volunteer to go in during our time, so I was there alone. They would charge and peck and bite your legs and your arms, anything in biting range, tear you apart if they could. I was not going to let 20 little chickens keep me from my degree. So it was one of the worst experiences of my college career, but I did it. And I can proudly say I think of those little things every time I eat fried chicken. I know it's mean, but you guys weren't there, you have no idea. When I graduated from Rutgers, I applied everywhere that had marine animals. All those types of jobs required a bachelor's degree, which I had, but they also required experience, which I didn't. So no one told me about that part. I did what I had to do. I started as a volunteer at the New Jersey State Aquarium, which is now the Adventure Aquarium. I started once a week, working with the seals. We had both harbor and gray seals, and while I didn't get to work much with them directly, I learned about their care, which led me to my second fear, public speaking, which I'm doing better at, I think. So one of the biggest parts of a job in an aquarium is public speaking. They do shows and presentations multiple times a day, and every employee takes part in some way. They knew my goal was to work there full time, so on one of my volunteer days, they handed me a microphone as a test and told me to go out and just talk about the seals during one of the feedings and answer any questions. I did. I wanted to pee my pants and run away and cry, but I did it anyway. I wish I could tell you that it went well, but it really, really didn't. I failed absolutely miserably. I went out, my voice shaking, trembling in fear, and I introduced myself. Hi, my name's Wendy, and I'm one of the volunteers here. Well, so far, so good. Then I went to introduce the seals, and I completely blanked. Here at the New Jersey State Aquarium, we have 2 types of seals that can both be found off the coast of New Jersey. We have, exactly, crickets. And about 100 faces staring at me, and I had nothing. I didn't know what I was doing. So thankfully, one of the trainers shouted the information at me, and I continued. It wasn't pretty, but I got through it, and even though I was embarrassed beyond belief, I asked to do it again the next time and the next, until I was comfortable. Thankfully, my persistence paid off because I was eventually offered a job as the veterinary technician, and I got to do some shows with some pretty amazing animals. As the vet tech, I was responsible for maintaining medical records for every single animal there, from the tiny poison dart frogs to the sharks and penguins, and even the hippos. Like all animals, the sharks required annual medical exams. I'm sure you're wondering how you do an exam on a shark. First thing is very, very carefully. But to do that, you have to be scuba certified, which I wasn't. So I convinced a friend of mine to get certified because I wanted to be in that water with the sharks. We went through the classes and the pool dives, but to get your certification, you have to do a night dive and you have to go down to 60 feet. Doesn't sound deep, but it really is. So new fear, not being able to see underwater. We went to a quarry in Pennsylvania and did a couple of dives during the day. Easy, few fish, some plants. They even had a few things sunk in the water to explore, like a car and a statue. Then we did the night dive. So I actually have a picture of it, and I'll show you soon, but I want to set the scene first so you know what you're looking at. It's 10 o'clock at night, dark outside, can barely see anything outside, and we get in the water and head down, and down, and down until we get to 60 feet. That's what you can see at 60 feet in crystal clear water in Pennsylvania. So there's something absolutely terrifying about not being able to see what is around you, especially when things are brushing up against your arm or touching your leg. You can't see the person next to you or your hand in front of your face, and you're breathing out of a tank that could run out of oxygen because you're panting so heavily out of sheer terror. But I forced myself to stay. I figured if I could get through this, swimming with the sharks would be no problem. I focused on the fluorescent yellow fins of my instructor and stayed glued to his butt. I got kicked in the face several times, but I did it, and I got my certification. And when I got to do my first dive with the sharks, there was a little bit of anxiety, but not nearly as much as not being able to see what's in front of me. I participated in my first shark exams, learned how to catch the sea turtles for theirs, and was part of the first shark surgery in the aquarium's history. Had I not faced my fears, I would have missed out. As I spent more time there learning about the animals, I was given a new task. I would now be in charge of taking care of the aquarium's educational reptile collection. These were reptiles and amphibians that were taken to classrooms and used during presentations for kids on school trips. Great, no problem. I like reptiles, I can do this. At least until they said, and by the way, we just got a new eastern king snake in that we want to use for the outrages. She's not very nice. Actually, she strikes at anyone trying to go in her cage. We need you to work with her on that. Great. New fear, aggressive snakes. Eastern king snakes are not poisonous, but their bites still hurt a lot. I had no experience with snakes at that point, but I was going to do this. I did my research and made my plan and crossed my fingers, and thankfully it worked. And because of how well it worked, I found my way into writing. My boss was so impressed with the process that I was asked to write a paper to be published in a scientific journal about the training process. From there, I was invited to write another paper on the enrichment program I introduced with the reptiles, and that was published as well. This was a huge deal for me at the time because while I loved to read, I hated to write. I was forced to take writing classes at Rutgers as part of my degree, but I did not do well. It never clicked, I struggled immensely, it was just torture. But when given the opportunity to write about what I love, it came easy. I developed a process and learned that while writing was a torturous experience, I could certainly enjoy it. My determination and drive opened many new doors at the aquarium, and I was given more opportunity to expand and work with different animals. Then I was introduced to the evil of all evils. My next fear, blue and gold macaws. This is Trinidad. Trinidad and his partner Dominique were difficult, to put it nicely. The very first thing they tell you when working with them is don't let them bite you, their beaks are strong enough to break a broomstick in half. Great. So what you need to understand about any bird is that they either like you or they don't. There's no in between, there's nothing, it's all or nothing with them. Luckily, the only bites I got from them were warnings. They never broke any of my bones, but they did draw blood a few times. My reward for working with them actually didn't come until about 15 years later, believe it or not. Caitlin and I had gone to the aquarium just for a visit and check up on my animals, and Trinidad was on exhibit. He actually noticed me in the crowd right away, and he started, when I started talking to him, he just went ballistic, he lost it. He fluffed up his feathers, got really excited, he displayed behaviors for me, he was showing off, and then when I eventually walked away, he was screaming for me to come back. So I guess absence makes the heart grow fonder, but I still don't like those birds. So face your fears. I can honestly say, up to that point, I had faced many. I came out of it stronger and with a lot of scars. Penguin bites were my least favorite, and they gave me the most scars. Getting stabbed in the leg by a porcupine wasn't pleasant either, but they are all memories that will stay with me for the rest of my life. I was very fortunate to not only graduate college and work within my intended field, but in the many memorable experiences that I had. I was there when the aquarium expanded and they brought in the 2 hippos for the new African exhibit. I watched the tractor trailer pull in and drive after they drove them up from Disney and saw the cranes lift them into the building, which was a truly amazing sight. The vet I worked for at the aquarium was also the vet for several other exotic places. With him, I was able to work with dolphins a few times, so I can say that I fulfilled my childhood dream. I helped him with an ultrasound on a pregnant dolphin. I went with him to examine sea lions at Great Adventure. But my favorite was that he worked with Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus whenever they came to town. So there I was up close and personal with some tigers, lions, elephants, and many other large animals. Unfortunately, they don't allow you to bring a camera backstage at this circus, so I don't have any pictures of those. But they did allow me to take one picture with one of the elephants. But like all good things, my career there came to an end. I'd reached a point where it was time to move on in my life. I was a new mother, and working nights and weekends and holidays was not what I wanted. New fear, starting over. When I left the aquarium, I worked at a small animal hospital close to home so that I could be there for my young kids. Being a vet tech is an extremely physically demanding job though, and after playing softball through high school and college and working with large animals at the aquarium, my body was just done with being tested on a daily basis. But what else could I do? It was all I had known my entire life. I had spent 20 years in that field, and the thought of doing anything else was absolutely terrifying. Most people don't start a new career in their late 30s, but I had no choice. I began working in sales in an industrial supply company, a desk job. It was quite the change going from being on your feet all day to sitting at a desk. I traded bites and scratches and wrestling animals for computers and phones and customer service. It took me some time to adjust to my life, a new life, and I will admit there were days that I fully regretted my decision. But like everything else I have faced, I pushed on. I'm still at that job, and as much as I dislike it at times, it is ultimately what led me to becoming an author. Back in 2018, I had a story in my head that wouldn't go away. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and the characters were begging me to do something. I kept coming back to my writing experiences in college, and for the longest time, I did my best to ignore the voices. But like all characters, they were relentless. I eventually spoke to my husband about it, and he encouraged me writing a shot. What's the worst that can happen? And he was right, so I decided to try. New fear, and one of my biggest ones yet, rejection and failure. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea where to start or how to organize my thoughts. Writing a book is completely different from writing a research paper on animals. I decided to just let the characters tell their own story, and to my surprise, I finished my first book in a few weeks. Well, the first draft. Finding an Anchor was my first book. When I finished, I decided to copyright it. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it from there, but it was done. The day that I received the copyright paperwork in the mail, I also got a phone call from a publisher. They were very interested in helping me publish my book, and I was so excited. It ended up being one of the worst lessons I learned as an author, but we'll get into that a little bit later. In November of 2019, Finding an Anchor hit the shelves, and I was officially a published author. I cannot explain the feeling of opening a box and holding your hard work in your hands. There are just no words. Each and every time I hold one of my books for the first time is overwhelming and emotional. And one of the proudest moments of my life was seeing my book on the shelf at Barnes & Noble, next to some of the most amazing romance authors. It was only there for a few weeks, but I will never forget those moments. I was so in love with the characters from that story that I decided they had more to say. I released the second book, Finding Forgiveness, on May 8th, and the third book, Finding One, on May 23rd that same year. Once the creative juices started flowing, there was no stopping them. This is where my new job comes into play. I wrote when I had time, on lunch breaks, at work, at baseball games for my son, but then I found out my new job offered tuition reimbursement. Essentially, they would fully pay for me to get my master's degree. I mean, how could I pass that up? I could get my master's in creative writing and become a better writer. New fear. How in the world am I going to do this? Am I too old to go back to school? How will I find the time to do schoolwork and be a wife and mother while working full time? And will I even be able to get into a master's program? This one took a lot of convincing. My husband and kids were beyond supportive of my decision. I applied to Southern New Hampshire University. They had an online program that was flexible, and I would be able to get my degree within 2 years. To my surprise, I got in. I was on my way to fulfilling yet another dream. If I succeeded, I would be the first in my entire family to get a master's degree. To say that going back to school at my age was eye-opening is an understatement. Keep in mind that when I was an undergrad at Rutgers back in the 90s, we did everything on paper. You can laugh, but I got my first email account when I was a freshman back then. At that point, we could write our papers on a computer, but they had to be printed out and turned in. And any research that was needed took place in the library in actual books, no internet. When I started the completely online program at SNHU, I was shocked and a little out of my element to do everything virtually. Weekly discussions were stressful because I quickly learned that the majority of my classmates were half my age, a fact they did not let me forget. I felt overwhelmed and excluded because I had nothing in common with them. Few would interact with me because I was so different, and my discussion posts were frequently unanswered by anyone other than my instructor. But, as Caitlin will tell you, I am not one to disappear into the background. I refuse to be left out or left behind. I used my experience in the veterinary field to work my way in. I found a way to draw people in to start conversations based on what I had experienced, and from there I was able to make connections. A few classes into the program, one of my instructors introduced me to their MFA program. This is a master's in fine arts. A master's degree that is a few steps beyond a standard master's. It is a bit more challenging and focused, but in the end, you graduate with not only your degree, but a certificate to teach online at the collegiate level. The catch is you must submit a writing sample that will be reviewed by professionals. What the heck, right? I'm already going for it, so why not? Denied. My first attempt was rejected. I received no feedback, just a comment that I did not get in. It was a huge hit to my ego and my heart. Why would my instructor recommend me for the program if my writing wasn't good enough? That turned into me thinking that I wasn't good enough, and I began to question everything. After a few tears and some sulking, I brushed myself off and turned that disappointment into determination. I was going to show them I could write, and I was going to get into that program. I went to the instructor who recommended me and asked her to read my submission and give me some feedback. She did, and I took it and rewrote my sample. I worked endlessly on editing, wanting to be the best piece of writing I could produce. On my second attempt, I was accepted into the MFA program, and that writing sample became the premise for my book, Chasing Freedom. The concept became so compelling, the character was screaming at me to tell her story. I used the idea in several classes as I learned the ins and outs of the writing process. New fear unlocked. Why am I not like anyone else? The first class that I took in the MFA program explored the concept of plotting your book. We had to outline and detail the plot chapter by chapter. We spent weeks diving deep into the path of our book. Character arcs, plot development, inciting incidents, storylines, everything was written in detail. I worked day in and day out on how I thought the story would go. I did well in the class, and once it was over, I wanted to actually write the book. This is where I thought I was a broken writer. I sat down with my detailed outline and started to write. But what I found was that my characters wanted the story to go very differently than what I had plotted. It may sound strange, but to me, my characters tell their story. I'm simply the vessel that writes it down. What I ended up with is completely different than what I had planned. It wasn't until a few classes later that I learned that I am not, in fact, broken. I am what is called a pantser, or someone who just sits down and writes without any planning. There are actually a lot of us out there. Writing is a very personal experience, and no two writers are the same, just like no two readers are the same. It is completely fine if you are a plotter, someone who has to plan everything ahead of time. It is also fine if you are a pantser, and it is more than fine if you are somewhere in between the two. You write how you write, and no one can tell you that your process is wrong, and if you come across someone who does, ignore them. There are writers who take years to write one book, and there are those who don't. That is the beauty of writing. There are no rules. Do what works for you, find your own process. It may take you some time to figure out what exactly that looks like, but in the end, it's yours to develop. I mentioned earlier that the publication of my first book was a learning experience. Today is a very different world than 20 years ago in the publishing world. Self-publication is at your fingertips and free. But like every other aspect of life, there are those looking to take advantage of that. The publisher that reached out to me for my first book was what I now know is called a glamour publisher. If there's anything that you take away from my talk today, it is this. Never, ever, ever pay anybody to publish your book. You don't have to do that. A glamour publisher is a publisher that charges you to produce your book. They often make empty promises, like helping you promote your book, so long as you pay them the money due. Thousands of dollars later, and you end up with a printed copy of your book and nothing else. Yes, my book was on the shelf at Barnes & Noble for a hot minute. That will always be one of the most amazing things in my life, but no one bought it because the publisher considered their job done at that point. There was no promotion, no advertising, no help. They got my money, and that was it. It was a difficult lesson to learn as a first-time author, but I moved on. I self-published the next 2 books in the series. I had no idea what I was doing and did not realize at that point just how much was involved in the process. This was before I had started school, so I had absolutely no direction. I just hopped on Amazon and figured it out. Turns out that self-publishing involves a lot more than just uploading your book. Editing, formatting, cover design, promotion, advertising, it's all on you. You can pay people for each of those things, but it can cost you a lot. The better the editor, the more you pay. Ads are extremely expensive, and covers can cost several $100s at best. I didn't have the money for any of those things, so I took turns putting on each ad to create my book. There were many, many mistakes and a huge learning curve, but I did it. It took a lot of research and trial and error, but I figured it out. But 21 books later, I'm still learning. I do have one of the biggest editing secrets that all self-publishing authors know, and I'm going to share it with you now. Read through your book repeatedly until you can almost recite it by heart. Hit publish, then read the published book. I guarantee you will find every single error that you missed when you were reading it through before. Spelling, grammar, formatting, you find it. Each time I publish a book, I inevitably find something that I missed. Thankfully, Amazon allows you to make changes and republish as much as you want, but you can't change what people have already purchased, so there's that. Editing your own work is difficult because you look at it as you want it to read. It's easy to miss spelling errors and grammar issues because you just read right through them. One of my favorite things that happened to me, and I can laugh about it now because I was able to fix it, is when I published one of my books, Caitlin read it and said, "Hey Mom, you realize you used the wrong character name in this entire chapter?" Nope. So I went back and I fixed it, and it's better now, but a few people got the book with the wrong character name in it. Editing is another thing that looks different for everyone. You find what works for you and your process can change over time. Having someone else read your book is a great idea because they can often see what you can't. Formatting can be difficult, another lesson I learned the hard way. But there's a lot of different softwares out there, and once you find the software that works for you, you can go back and fix any errors that you made in the past. I learned something new with each book that I publish, and in my opinion, each one looks better than the last. New fear. Uh-oh. This means people are actually going to read my books. Bad reviews suck. There's no other way to put it. Of course, you want everyone to love your stories. The best thing I can tell you is that no two people read the same story, and you can't please everyone. That's why there are so many different genres. People like different things, and even if someone loves romance books, they may not love what I wrote. 1-star reviews hurt, but the worst are the reviews that are written out describing in detail exactly what they didn't like for everyone else to see. Bad reviews are inevitable though, and some people are not shy about sharing their dislike. It is part of writing. The best thing you can do is move on. I would tell you to not even read your reviews, but the good ones are what keep me writing. It is amazing to have someone say that they finished your book in one sitting because they couldn't put it down, and sometimes they can even make you laugh. The only time we get my book including time travel and dinosaurs, one reviewer said she enjoyed it, but was really hoping the main character would get eaten by a dinosaur in the end because she found her annoying. But she gave it 4 stars, so I'll take it. Again, you can't please everyone. I have learned so much in the past few years, not only about writing, but about what I want from my writing and about who I am as a writer. About a year ago, I paid for a consultation with a very successful indie writer. She claims to make 6 figures a year with her novellas, and she offers her services to other indie writers to help them make more sales. I figured it was worth a shot, especially if she could give me any advice on selling. We met via Zoom and spoke for about an hour, and the most important thing that I learned is that I don't want to be like her in any way, shape, or form. She was very nice, but to her, writing is all about the money. She told me that in order to sell books, I need to write what is popular. For instance, in the romance world, motorcycle club books are very popular. I know nothing about motorcycles or their clubs. Alien and monster romances are also big, and yes, those do exist. Those are stories where a person falls in love with an alien or a monster, and they actually are on the bestsellers lists. I just don't have it in me to write a love story about a human with a mythical creature. Essentially, she was telling me that in order to sell books, I need to change who I am. And that's where she lost me. She wanted me to change my entire brand, which is essentially how I sell myself as a writer, and make myself for what people want to see, not who I am. Even though our conversation did not lead me to the great secret of selling more books, I was glad to have had it. It made me realize what I want out of writing. I'm not in this to become rich or famous. I don't care if I'm a household name, and I definitely don't want to be forced to write something that I am not passionate about. I just want to tell my stories. I want to be myself and not something fake just to be considered successful. I want you to remember this, commit it to memory or write it down, do whatever you need to do to keep it with you. Your success is not measured by how much money you make, and no matter in anything that you do. Success is not measured in dollars. I'll be the first person to admit that this is one of the most difficult things to accept. As a writer, it is hard to feel successful if you're not hitting the bestsellers list. It is something that I struggle with every day, especially when I only get 3 or 4 reviews on a new book that I poured my heart and soul into. But that's not what matters. What matters is that I wrote what I wanted to write. I wrote from the heart, and I put forth my best work. It's about being proud of what I wrote. If it only reaches one person, then so be it. But the fact is, I'm proud of it. I have a small group of women that I call my book moms. They are my most loyal readers. I've never met them in person, but we interact on social media. They buy each of my books the day I release them, and they always recommend my work in their book groups. The simple fact that I have a few people that wait for my new releases is more than enough for me. It is humbling, and I can honestly say that it means the world to me to have such support. Be true to yourself, write what you love, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Art, in general, is very subjective. People can look at a painting by Picasso and love it, and some will hate it or just not understand it. Writing is exactly the same. It is important to be proud of what you put out, but even more important to face your fears and never give up. Getting traditionally published is still a goal for me, but I refuse to let rejection define me. The book you are getting today, Loudening Silence, is my thesis novel from graduate school. In order to graduate, you must complete a full-length novel and have it approved. Full length is considered 80,000 words or more. Once it was finished, we got the opportunity to pitch our novel to 2 agents. Both agents that I pitched asked me to submit the book for their review. I was very excited because many of my peers didn't even make it that far. Ultimately, they both passed on representing my book. I then pitched it to 20 other agents and was rejected by all. 20 may sound like a lot, but it really isn't. Nowadays, it is common to have to pitch several hundred times before you find an agent. The official odds of getting traditionally published is between 1 and 2%, and the romance genre is the most competitive genre, so the odds are even worse. To put it in perspective, Harry Potter was rejected by 12 publishers before it found its home. Twilight was rejected by 14. A Wrinkle in Time was rejected over 25 times. Stephen King's Carrie was rejected over 30 times, and Gone with the Wind over 40 times. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. One of my favorite authors, and someone that I truly look up to, is Melanie Moreland. She is a self-publisher. After great success with one of her books, a publisher found her and republished several of her books, and they are now on the shelf at Barnes & Noble, and she continues to get publishing contracts from now. This came 11 years after she self-published her first book. I'm not giving up. The dream is still there. I will tell you that as a self-published author, I have the freedom to do anything I want, and no one can tell me no. I can collaborate with my amazing artist daughter, and I have her illustrate and design the cover for some of my books. My For the Future series is one of my most popular series, and it isn't even complete. There's still a 3rd book to come out. I set my own schedule, I design my own covers, and I work how I want. I can go back to school in my 40s and graduate with my master's. I can do an interview with a magazine about my work. I can submit my work to writing contests and win. I can face my fears and be proud of my accomplishments. Don't give up on your dreams. Don't let fear stop you from doing something new or different. Face your fears, because you never know what's going to happen. Before I finish today, I wanted to read you a little bit of the scene in Loudening Silence, the book you're going to get today. Loudening Silence is about a young deaf woman finding her way in a futuristic, ravaged world where only the strong survive. Sea levels have risen, pushing all survivors inland, where they have separated into those that live within fenced communities under strict rule and those that live outside the fences in freedom. Her abusive father has exiled her, sending her outside the safety of the fenced community because he suspects she has stolen his journal, which contains his maniacal plans to take control. In this scene, Ashlyn, the main character, and Eli, her love interest, have returned to the fenced community to retrieve the stolen journal in hopes that they can stop her father's tyrannical plans and keep their people safe. They've snuck into her old home to retrieve the proof she needs to stop her father. This takes place from Ashlyn's perspective, because Ashlyn is deaf. The majority of dialogue takes place in American Sign Language, which is designated throughout the book in italics. So this is in Ashlyn's perspective. There's a loose floorboard under the bed, I sign. We need to shift the bed to get to it. Eli nods and motions for Luke to help him. They lift the bed and position it to the side so that I can retrieve the journal. For some reason, touching it now is like grabbing a live electrical wire. There is a power to it, as if my body understands the danger it is in for handling what should be just a simple inanimate object. Evil is oozing from its surface like an invisible force. I quickly stuff it in my bag, wanting it out of my hands. After a quick nod to Eli, he holds his hand out to help me stand. As much as I hate to admit it, this was much easier than I expected. If things keep going our way, we could be home in time to tuck Reed into bed. Stupid, stupid girl. In a sudden rush of mayhem, my father's men stormed the cabin, and with the ferocity of which only he is capable. I can see mouths moving as they shout words I can't hear. Spit is flying freely into the air, accompanying each hateful word they spew at us. Eli and Luke are taken down, both overpowered by several men, as someone else grabs me from behind. I watch in horror, fighting against the man holding me, trying desperately to get free so that I can get to my gun. But his hold is strong and unbreakable. I wince in pain as he pins my arms back much further than they are intended to move. I can't for the life of me concentrate on anything but Eli's face as he wrestles for control. The redness there, coupled with the muscles straining in his neck, shows just how much effort he is exerting to get to me, and his desperation matches my own. There is a moment when everything stills. I try to convey to Eli how sorry I am, that I wish for his sake that he never met me, that I don't know. I have no idea what I wanted to know. I just don't want him hurt. I knew this was going to happen. I knew my father would be waiting for me, and I still let them come. This is all my fault, and I will never forgive myself if anything happens to either of them. The air suddenly thickens, and the tension in the room elevates with an electric charge. It becomes hard to breathe, and any hope I was carrying that we would escape unscathed disappears. I don't need to see what changed. I already know. My heart stops when he walks in. Just like every single encounter in my past, my father's presence is demanding, yet most unwelcome. His shoulders are back, his lips turned down, his eyes glaring at me with severity that would make even the strongest man cower. But I hold my ground. I am no longer the meek, troubled daughter that he frequently belittled. I now have something, someone to fight for, and I let that add fuel to the raging fire burning inside me. Ashlyn, he signs, and for some reason, even the way he fingerspells my name is insulting. He has no nickname, no shortened version of signing my name. He never has. I honestly don't think I would want to know what that is if he would. I fight against my captor, struggling to pull my arms free so that I can sign, but it isn't until my father nods at the man holding me that he lets me go. Always in control. It is a tactic that he utilizes as frequently as possible to convince himself of his importance in this community. Father, I sign, and his scowl deepens. Why are you doing this? I figured you'd be thrilled that I left. I try to sign my words with hostility, not wanting to appear weak in front of Eli and Luke. But even more than that, I have no ambition to give my father the satisfaction of seeing me squirt. I am done being intimidated by such a vile creature. Believe me, daughter, it was quite a pleasant surprise to learn that you disappeared. Yet, at the same time, disappointing that you survived, he signs, and Eli loses it, shouting profanities at my father. His muscles pull tight as he fights against those holding him back. You can't speak to her like that. I watch Eli's mouth move. With one nod from my father, one of the men behind Eli smashes him in the head with the butt of his gun, and Eli's eyes roll back in his head as he collapses to the floor in a heap. My mouth opens in a silent scream as I scramble to get to Eli. I make it barely a step before the men at my sides grab at me, preventing me from reaching his battered body. Luke is fighting hard as well, but they knock him out next, leaving me alone to deal with my father. I stare at their lifeless forms, fury racing through my body like a physical force. I can already tell that I will be bruised from the firm grasp these men have on my arms, and it only adds to my rage. Stop, my father signs calmly to me, as if he didn't just approve of a heinous act of violence. It is typical behavior of him, not caring whatsoever about anyone other than himself. I stop struggling, not because he said to, because I know that I must act rationally if I want to save Eli and Luke. My father's hostile focus remains on me for what feels like a lifetime as I pant angrily, his eyes, like always, glaring right through me. My priority is Eli, but the man who has done nothing but tell me I'm worthless my entire life has earned just as much of my attention. There are two men that couldn't be more different if they tried. I throw my shoulders forward to free myself so that I can sign. What do you want? I ask my father, keeping a close watch on Eli's crumpled form. His chest rises and falls slowly, the only consolation I get. My father glares at me with the disdain I'm used to. The only difference this time is that I have seen the other side of the fence and have witnessed the true compassion that people are capable of, and I refuse to let him take that from me. Where is it, Ashlyn? My father signs, getting right down to the root of the issue. A simple question, but one that doesn't deserve an answer. Or maybe it is the man asking that has not earned my response. I shrug, knowing fully well that it will piss him off even more. It is probably not my smartest move, but given the situation, it's what I offer. In a lightning-fast move, he backhands me across the face, whipping my head violently to the side. I taste blood on my lips, and there's now a blaring, constant throb in my cheek, but I don't react. I don't remove one single muscle. Where is it? If it were possible for signs to have sounds, those 3 words would have been deafening with the animosity that I know was put into them. I smirk. He is unraveling right in front of me, and I love every second of it and the consequences. My father is not the well put together man that he constantly tries to portray. I just found his button, and I intend to push it as often as possible. With one jerk of his chin, my world collapses. Absolute agony shoots from my neck into my spine, traveling throughout my body as if it has free rein. Something is pressed into my skin that is emitting the most horrific impulse. I slump to the floor, my legs no longer able to support my weight under this internal attack. Spasms rack my limbs and I flail about. Every single part of me slams against the floor harshly, adding to the immense torture, as if it was a wrathful current lighting my insides on fire. I am at complete loss of control. My bladder releases and urine soaks my pants. Every cell in me is shutting down, and time ceases to exist altogether with any cognizance I had been clinging to desperately. Then, just as suddenly as it all began, it stops. Awareness slowly creeps in as my mind struggles to comprehend what just took place. I am face down on the floor, my arms spread out to the side, and my legs lie motionless like bulky logs. Everything feels heavy as I attempt to move. It takes what feels like a lifetime for me to gather the strength to get my arms under me. I push, putting everything I have into it, and eventually manage to shift myself into a semi-upright position, sitting stiffly on my ass, my back hunched over. I immediately search for Eli, and am both relieved and horrified to see that he is not only awake, but focused on me. He is now kneeling across the room, his hands pinned behind his bloody head, and I have no idea what just happened or how long it took. But from the shock and concern on Eli's face, it was probably a while, and he witnessed at least a portion of it. My father is now wearing a smug expression. "You bastard," I sign, yet it takes a massive amount of effort. There is no hostility behind my signs, because my energy is completely depleted. Now, daughter, is that any way for you to speak to a man who raised you?" he asks, as he shakes his stubby finger at me. Beyond furious at his words, I force my arms to work. "Raised me? Really? That's what you think you were doing?" I sign with a little more force. "You did everything in your power to shame me for existing." His face reddens as he takes a step closer to me. "Because you shouldn't exist." He must have also shouted the words because I feel droplets of his spit splash on my face, adding insult to his signs. I blanch at his completely unexpected words. Eli's confusion mirrors my own. "What does that mean?" I ask slowly, not completely sure I want to know the answer. My father's demeanor suddenly changes, and a chill fills the air. His nostrils flare as his lips turn inward. I can almost feel his teeth grinding as he takes another purposeful step toward me. He comes closer and closer to the point where we are breathing the same thick air. Eli's look changes to that of pure hostility as I glance at him out of the corner of my eye, but I am physically unable to stop gawking at the horrifying scene unfolding in front of me. My body is readying itself for another blow. In all my years with my father, I have never witnessed such anger, such animosity, such absolute malevolence pouring from his body, and I honestly fear for my life. Time stands still as he stoops down to leer at me. I try to steady myself, but it is no use. This is it. This is where it all ends. I cannot see any way out of this. All those years spent questioning my life, dreaming of something bigger, and wanting more were for nothing. A movie of my past is playing in my mind as the dreadful seconds tick by. Beautiful moments with my mother, finding Atticus, meeting Eli, none of it matters anymore, because for whatever reason, this man in front of me looks at my existence as trivial, a nuisance. And maybe it is. Maybe there is no room for me in this uncertain world. Just as I think this couldn't possibly get any worse, my father drops the biggest bomb on me. It means, Ashlyn, that you'll have to read the book to find out. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for her before we get to the part where you get your books? Oh, there's a question.
My mother has a passion in writing, and she's had it since she was young. Do you have any advice for older women who like to go into writing?
Honestly, just do it. Just do it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? She writes it, she's not happy with it, and nothing goes from there. You know, you have to be able, like I said, to face your fears and just try. So definitely just sit down and go for it and see what happens from there.
Well, you said earlier that romance is one of the biggest most competitive genres. What genre or literary subgenre has a lot of untapped potential?
Wow. I still am going to stick with romance because there are so many different subgenres of romance. Romantic suspense for me, like I said, is my absolute favorite, and there's so many different directions that you can go. You can go dystopian like I choose to go. You can come up with different scenarios and form an entire world around it. So I think anything is an untapped potential, honestly. You can just take anything any way you want. Creativity is at your hands. You just do what you want.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the list of everybody that was nominated. When you get your bag, you will see that not only is the autographed book in there, as well as the folder with all of you and like who nominated you and all of that. But then there's also some goodies that the author has given you, including a keychain, a pen. There's a bunch of little things for you inside of there as well. So what you will do is when I call you up, come up and grab one of the bags, and I have certificates for you, but I just realized I never signed them, so I'm going to give you the certificates tomorrow. You'll get those in email. That's not a big deal, or not email, you'll get it in your homeroom. So that's not that big of a deal, but you will get them. We're just going to do the bags right now, because of course I missed something in this. Okay, Michael Accardi, Matt Adamski, Brennan Bailey, Grace Bauer, Nick Bonavita. So if you'll come up and just go over there and grab one of the bags. And everybody can start admiring all the people that got their enthusiastic readers. Stephen Braithen, Kira Bruno, Emilio Carpintero, Lauren Castellano, and Max Castellano. I know some people weren't here today. Diana Castillo, Max Coley, Declan Davis, Sophia DeRizzi, and Finda Rose. Allison Diaz, Lorelei Diaguardi, Joseph Dona, Christian Dutz, and Rodrigo Farfan. Michaela Ford, Richard Formica, Jeremy George, Zachary Guerrier, and Matthew Geifelin. Mason Hall, Fotini Haratos, Lydia Hartman, Peyton Havens, Bryn Hilbert. Ryan Horn, Ina Husak, Chris Ayusu, Luke Jansen, Ariel Jones, Sophia Jones. Ryan Knott, Olivia Kranek, Noah Krasner, Prisha Kupsad, Madison LaMonica. Tierney Lang, Juliana Loriano, Natalie Levine, Haley McKay, oh, I'm sorry, Mackey, my bad. Ben Malovich. Izzy McLeister, River Meyer, Kaylee Misvitowitz, Alyssa Mooney, Elizabeth Mooney. Olivia Mooney, Caroline Moriarty, Kate Pagano, Dia Parkin, Reese Perry. Emily Petrillo, Ava Peer, Jordan Pinto, Peter Cueros, Amina Rabat. Caroline Rasmussen, Jessica Rennie, Madia Resch, Haley Ronahan, Miles Roy. Sean Salas, Osa Sampson, Osa Sanaga Sampson, Ava Saracen, Monroe Schloss, and Francesca Scavilli. Viana Scolo, Kizjot Sin, Chris Siwick, Avery Stavero, Joseph Strong. Elena Taskowitz, Peyton Towers, Jasmine Valdez Cruz, Chloe Vincent, Erin Waslick, and that brings us to the Z's. Ryan Zane, Demetria Zimnis, and Caitlin Zuccarella. Now, I know some of you are sitting here like, my teacher brought me to watch everybody else get a gift, and I didn't get any. And here's how you fix that. Bring a book with you. Read. Open up a whole new portal. Take some time and pull it away from the phone. Maybe even go to audiobooks, because they're not a bad thing either. But let your mind open up to different stories. Start to take a book, start to look, start to spend some time and really immerse yourself in a whole different world. Maybe one of your teachers next year will catch you when you least suspect it and put you down as next year's enthusiastic reader. So I want to thank all the teachers for bringing them, your students here. I want to thank all of the students for coming and for being awesome. And Have a great day. I think the weather cleared out there, and have a great rest of the year. Congratulations.